Going on, folks? Welcome to Weekly Bible Study. If it's your first time here, my name is Philip Godfrey. If you're returning, welcome back, Bible Study family. And so, Bible study is built off of the scriptures in Matthew 6:33, where the Messiah tells us to seek ye first the kingdom of the Father and his righteousness, and all things shall be added unto you. So, we're gathering to do just that, to see, seek, and serve the kingdom of the Father. And so today it is a video because I'm traveling once again, but I want to make sure that we continue the assignment. And so today is a video, and I'm not watching it live with you. That's why it's not a premiere and it's just a video. But thank you guys so much for joining, and for walking through this assignment with us. And so today we'll be continuing our series of studies entitled From Creation to Revelation, where we're walking through the entirety of the Bible, book by book, in one calendar year. We began in Genesis, and all of the teachings from that point up until now can be found on my page in a playlist entitled From Creation to Revelation. I do want to note again here that, as we work through the studies, these are really just like summaries and introducing you to the text. So please go back and study and confirm and everything that I say, because I could tell you anything. I'm not, but I could be telling you anything. All right. So let's go ahead and jump in. Today, as part of this study series, we'll be looking at the books of Titus and the books of Philemon. The book of Titus and the book of Philemon. We're looking at both of those books today. All right. So let's jump in with a background on the book of Titus. So Titus is another what historians have kind of titled pastoral letters, another letter written by Paul to a son or fellow laborer in the faith, Titus. Titus and Timothy were kind of like contemporaries of one another. But here, Paul is addressing Titus and encouraging him to endure the opposition that is coming from the false teachers. He also uses this letter to give Titus instructions on how believers should live their lives going forward, and instructions for how the church should be governed and what the hierarchical the governance of the church should look like from a hierarchy perspective. As we move into chapter 1, we first see that the book, like many of Paul's letters, begins by, I'm laughing because I've said this so many times as we've walked through Paul's letters, but it begins with Paul first identifying himself as the author and apostle of the Messiah, and noting here that he is writing to Titus, his son, who he identifies as his son after the faith. So he goes on to remind Titus that he left him there in Crete. So Titus has been left in this city for a particular reason. And Paul says that their reason is so that he could set things in order there among the believers and ordain elders. So Paul is writing to help him do that, to assist him in that assignment. Similar to what we saw with Paul shared with Timothy, he tells Titus here that the elders should have the following qualifications: that elders should be blameless, the husband of one wife, with faithful children. He goes on to say that a bishop should be blameless, a steward of the Father, not self-willed, not quickly angry, not given to wine, not a fighter or seeking after evil money. But the bishop must love hospitality, love good men, be sober, just, holy, temperate, and following the word faithfully that he has been taught, able to use sound doctrine to exhort and convince those who oppose. This was the assignment or the responsibilities that Paul identified as belonging to elders and bishops, and their ability to be able to do that. He goes on to say that they should be able to do this because there are many that he identified, many of the circumcision who would be unbelieving Jews, who are deceivers and vain talkers, who are just teaching for filthy lucre. And so this is just saying they're teaching for money, basically. They're teaching for bribes. They're teaching to kind of be greedy, to promote themselves, etc. So Paul goes on to say that these people should be rebuked sharply so that they can actually be sound in the faith. So he's like, hey, I want them to actually be sound. So you need to rebuke them and actually teach them the truth. And that you should rebuke them and not follow after Jewish fables and the commandments of men, which are ultimately leading all the believers or leading people astray. He goes further to state that if these people are defiled and unbelieving, then nothing is pure to them. So it shows us that when people are in a state of unbelief, and a state of being defiled, that nothing is pure to them, because Paul says their mind is defiled. And if their mind is defiled, he's saying that they cannot really understand or really process the things of the works of the Father, and the things and the actions that are required by following the teachings of the message of the Messiah. So these people, Paul says, they say that they know the Father. They say that they know the Father with their lips, but they deny really knowing Him by their works and actions. So this shows us that there's a component of our alignment with the Messiah and to the message of the Messiah that we must, our actions and our works must align with what we actually say. Because he's saying, hey, these people who are unbelieving and defiled and not pure, they are actually saying that they follow the Father. They're actually saying that they know the Father, but they're denying Him by how they live their lives, being abominable, disobedient, and reprobate. So we shouldn't be working to not be those things. Paul goes on to say in chapter 2 that along with building the elders, he tells Titus to promote and teach the things of sound doctrine to the people, making sure that the aged men or the elders, the older men and women, that they pour back into the younger generation and teach them the ways and things of the Father. So he's also giving Titus the understanding that, hey, it should be a village, a community type aspect to the teaching. That those who are further along should be teaching those who are newer. That you should be teaching and exhorting everyone as well, but there should also be a process where the bishops are teaching and pushing back, and the elders are teaching, and the deacons are teaching and pushing back, and all those things. He tells Titus to encourage the young men to be sober minded and have a pattern of good works and alignment to sound doctrine so that others will have no evil thing to say to them. He encourages him to teach the servants to be obedient to their masters, and that the grace of the Father is what brings salvation, as He has appeared to all men in the Messiah. He teaches us that we should deny ungodliness and worldly lusts and instead live. He's telling Titus to teach the people this, but we should be teaching this and living this ourselves, that we should be denying ungodliness and worldly lust and instead living soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. That we should be focused on the blessed hope and the coming again of the Messiah, who has redeemed us from iniquity and purified us unto Himself as a peculiar people. And Paul tells Titus that he's to speak all of these things, to exhort the people and rebuke whatever does not align to it. Does that make sense? In chapter 3, as the book ends and as the letter begins to end, Paul again tells Titus to make sure that the believers are following and being obedient to the powers and leaders of the day, that they are not to speak evil of any man or be a fighter, but to be gentle and meek unto all men, acknowledging and understanding that we too at times, Paul's talking about himself, but we too at times as believers, as the leaders or the believers, I guess Paul was saying, that they too at times were disobedient, that they were also deceived at some point. We know that Paul was deceived at some point, but now they are saved according to mercy, which is the Messiah, found in the Messiah, and made heirs according to the hope of eternal life. He closes the letter by telling them to maintain good works, avoid false teachings in the form of foolish questions, genealogies, contentions, and strivings about the law. He tells them to reject heretics, but to focus on being fruitful. With that, the letter ends with Paul signing off and noting that those around him are saluting Titus as well as he writes him. So that's the book of Titus. Paul here it's very similar to Timothy, but Paul giving instructions to the leader, to Titus as a leader in that ministry at that period of time, for the furthering and the continuation and the building of the believers there. Let's move into the letter of Philemon, all right? So a little background on Philemon. So here Paul is writing another letter, and he's writing a letter to Philemon, who is a wealthy leader in the church at Colossae, so the church of the Colossians. Paul, through this letter, is appealing to Philemon on behalf or for Onesimus. So Onesimus was once Philemon's servant, and he kind of escaped or something like that. I don't know all the details, but some believe that he was a slave, so he escaped. But some believe that he might have owed Philemon some money or something like that. I don't know about all those details. But Onesimus was no longer his servant for whatever reason. And so Paul requests that Philemon would receive Onesimus back to him, but as a brother, because Onesimus he had escaped and come and sat under Paul's teaching and had gotten saved, had become a believer. And so now he's appealing. Thank you, Holy Spirit. He's appealing to Philemon to receive Onesimus back as a brother this time and not as a servant. And even though this is about Philemon and Onesimus, one thing that was highlighted to me through revelation by the Spirit was how the Messiah also appeals on our behalf, like Paul here is appealing on the behalf of his brother, who's come into alignment with the message of the Messiah and wanting him to be in right alignment with the believers there in Philemon as well. So the letter begins again, chapter 1 is the only one chapter. So the letter begins by Paul identifying himself, or the book identifying himself as the writer, with Timothy in agreement with him as he is writing. He writes to Philemon and also all the believers who were gathering in his home. So Philemon, again, was one of the leaders or one of the wealthy believers in the church of Colossians. And they ultimately were gathering, some of them were gathering in his home. He allowed them to gather in his home. And so Paul first starts by acknowledging and recounting Philemon's love and faith toward the Messiah and the believers. Paul lets him know quickly, and very early on in the letter, it's a short letter, but he lets him know very early on that he's writing for love's sake as a more mature version of himself. He's saying, hey, I'm a more mature Paul, and I'm writing to you in this way. And he is now bound as this more mature believer, as a follower of the Messiah. So I don't know if Philemon knew Paul previously or what, but he's saying, hey, I'm writing to you from this place now. And he's writing and asking on behalf of his son. Paul identifies Onesimus as a son in the faith who has spent some time with him and has been of great benefit to him in this season. So Paul, similar to what we saw, Paul is writing this, by the way, at the same time that he's writing the book of Colossians. And so the challenges that Paul were experiencing as he wrote the book of Colossians, he's also experiencing here. And so he's saying that Onesimus has been a benefit to him in this season where he's been challenged and he's had to walk through some difficult things. Paul states that he would have loved for Onesimus to stay with him and continue to be a benefit to him, but he could not do that, knowing that there were unfinished things between Onesimus and Philemon. So he tells Philemon that he sent Onesimus back to him, and Paul is writing this letter, sending with this letter, asking Onesimus to receive him, but not as a servant, as a brother now. Paul goes on to say that if Philemon considers him, Paul, a brother and partner, he's imploring him like, hey, if me and you cool, like receive Onesimus back, do it for me, you know. And he goes on to note that if there are any debts or there are things that need to be settled between him and Philemon financially, then Paul says that he will pay those things. He will repay those things. He goes on to say he'll do this even though Philemon owes him his own self, which I thought was hilarious. How, those people be like, man, I'm gonna give you that money back, but you know, I really don't even owe you because, you owe me your life, or, kind of stuff like that. So Paul is essentially having that conversation with him, which I find hilarious. Paul goes on to end the letter by stating that he's confident that Philemon will be obedient to this request and will actually receive Onesimus back as a brother now. And he then asks Philemon to prepare a place for him to stay, as he's hoping to come and visit him as an answer to his prayers, to answer to Philemon's prayers. And Paul closes the letter by telling Philemon that all those that are with him and around him greet him and salute him as well. So that is the book of Philemon. That was a quick one, but that's the book of Philemon. All right. So thank you guys. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything that stood out to you, anything that jumped out to you as we walk through the books of Titus and Philemon, and just anything that has been highlighted to you as we walk through all of these studies this year. Please let us know those things down in the comments. On the next study, we'll be looking at Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, chapters 1 through 6. And then after that, we'll be looking at chapter 7 through the end of the book of Hebrews. So go ahead and give those a read. Hey, I know this was a quick one, but hey, I love you. More importantly than me loving you, though, is the fact that the Father loves you, okay? Let him love you. Start before you're ready and don't stop. I'll catch you guys next time.